Joining me now live in our Lagos studio to discuss this trend, I have Wale Ogundare, the Managing Partner, Chief Executive Officer at Kathina Advisory Services. Good to have you on the breakfast show this morning.
Thank you very much, David.
Now, it's no surprise that we're having these figures come. We've had consistent rise, a spike in our inflation figures, but Nigerians are paying much more for literally everything from food to services. Now, how critical is it for us to attend to our food crisis at this point in time? Because that's what's really fueling inflation, and we have Nigerians having limited purchasing power because our salaries remain the same, earning capacity remains the same, and the prices are going higher.
So, you know, one part most people haven't looked at is the rise in the exchange rates. You see, what is inflation? Inflation is when your local currency continues to lose value. And as the local currency continues to lose value, there's pressure on what the local currency can buy, which is why you're saying your salaries remain the same. The cost of production continues to increase, and the ability for people to afford, you know, whatever it is, gets very high. So the challenge that I see, you know, as I've always looked at Nigeria's problem, it's a systemic distress that we're going through. So we're just coming out of a corona pandemic.
We're still in the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, we're coming out gradually. Vaccines are being distributed now. The prices of goods are going up. Nigeria is an import-dependent economy, and this is primarily the reason for most of this. So as the dollar exchange rate increases, the ability of Nigerians to use the naira to do anything decreases because we keep on importing. Our productive base, so I'm going to solutions now. Our productive base is still poor. And if your productive base is poor as a country, when you can't feed yourself, that's a problem. I'm seeing things like rice, yam tuber, potatoes, oil. Fish, all of the normal things that we eat. Staple food, you know, it's getting out of reach. You know, there's one stat that you didn't share. I saw Sokoto and Kogi State. Kogi State even makes me very worried because Kogi is supposed to be the food basket of the nation. Kogi State is currently leading overall inflation when it comes to food. So that in itself gives me a major worry that what is going on. And as I've said it, if you sort of unravel this problem a bit more, you find out that because we do not have the required infrastructure, because an infrastructure around power, roads, rail, all of those things, the ability of us to produce food, get it to the required places on time, is a problem.
So you're saying in simple terms, we are making the same mistakes we've been making over time.
Correct.
The value of the naira is depreciating, and at the end of the day, looking at advanced climes, cost-cutting measures is the way to go. But we cannot necessarily cut costs at this point in time, looking at how the naira is trading. So what mistakes do you think we are necessarily making and government has to intervene in the short term? Because, for example, now the closest plateau we are seeing is by the end of the third or fourth quarter or come next year. So we expect the figures to even reach as high as 25% thereabouts.
Correct. So if you say what mistakes have a government been making, you know, Nigeria's mistakes, that need addressing now.
Correction.
You know, first, the cost of governance is too high. That's one. Two, all of the government agencies, and I work with a few of them, everybody is going at it solo. Nigeria's efforts are not being properly coordinated. You know, if you want to address a national problem, you create some sort of coordinated measure towards it. So if you look at strikes going on all over the place, for instance, the judiciary on strike, health system on strike, when you see those things, it tells you that there's a bigger problem. You know, so those problems usually reflect via inflation, and you begin to see the pressures, and those indicators are what is close to us. What I think the government can do immediately is to take a look at the micro and macro policies. You know, and for me, the CBN hasn't been allowed to do their work over time. So I see CBN, so the issues of you're printing money, you're not printing money, that isn't what we should be talking about right now. The micro policies that can be used to engineer agriculture or to re-engineer it very, very quickly, They're not, nobody is talking about that. The macro policies that tend to affect things like the exchange rate, nobody is talking about it right now. And there's so many entrepreneurial farmers all over the place. Nobody is saying, how do we finance these guys? How do we locate them? How do we finance them? How do we cure this problem very quickly? For me, even when you do those things, because the infrastructure base of a country is still poor, then we have a challenge. And you see, one last thing is, if your infrastructure base is poor, you have to ask yourself, how can I fix it? You can't fix it until you have an enabling environment. You can't have an enabling environment until, as a government, you sort of do several things. One, we need to detribalize how we approach issues. We need to remove religion from how we think as a country. We're so secular that it begins, you know, I'm on Twitter a lot. When I see young Nigerians, and they form the bulk of the country, so ignore them at your peril, arguing about North versus South, Christianity versus Islam, those things break my heart, because what it means is that you have a whole set of people who can't actually come together to lift us out of this poverty-stricken situation. And the problem is the government itself, it's as if they're clueless. So Nigeria is kind of like something on the free fall. You know, nobody is intervening in any meaningful way or form. Let's just carry on with how we've always been. Let's just make money from oil whilst we can. Nobody is saying, when we stop to make money from oil, what do we need to do? We need to force ourselves to start thinking in that manner. Until we do, all these things will continue.
But do you see a change in terms of the body language of the government at subnational and national levels? Do you think we're going to see any new twist in terms of the narratives, investment volumes, in terms of aggressive policies to the key sectors of the economy? You made mention of agriculture. We also have to look at manufacturing. So many sectors are shouting and crying that there's scarcity in the forex market. This is supposed to be the engine of growth at this point in time to stimulate any sort of recovery. We are not necessarily putting our best foot forward in terms of stimulants and incentives. It's just written on paper. So how disappointing is this? And then how do you now think we might likely see a shift in terms of government's body language?
You know, when we say government's body language, I don't think we're going to see any shift in government's body language, to be quite honest. They've carried on.
But the hardship is real, so it must force the hand of government. So many are saying, well, for the Central Bank of Nigeria at this point in time, we might likely see the tightening of rates because they're already pushed to the wall. They can't necessarily do everything. They're pushing monetary policies, but we also need the fiscal aspect to also stimulate.
So correct. So if you look at some of the policies they've set up in the recent past and reversed, including things like the NIN. I talked about this NIN earlier on. It's a major disservice to business. It tells me that in government, they're not thinking through most of these things before they do it. We saw what happened with the NIN. Now they've reversed it. All of a sudden now there's this all sorts of issues around the minister. If you look at the country as a whole, we're not running a country the way it should be run. We're not. And until we do, we'll continue. Look, I've always said Nigeria's problem is a psychological problem. That's the fundamental bit I've seen. I've seen a few people come on clubhouse rooms and, you know, this social media thing and talk about Nigeria. And when I listen, and these are highly placed individuals, it tells me that the thinking to turn Nigeria around currently isn't in government in any shape or form.
Mr. Ogundare, to just cut you, and then for the lack of time now, let's just talk about taxing. Now, at the end of the day, Nigerians are facing very excruciating pain. Their pockets are lamenting. How then do we still tax Nigerians that are already dealing with very harsh economic conditions, unbearable to say the least?
You know, our tax revenues will dwindle. There's nothing we can do about it because taxes are a function of revenue. If you're not making revenues, how are you going to tax?
Is there any innovative twist do you also expect?
I don't see any innovative twist whatsoever. Look, we're 200 million thereabouts in this country. 120 million currently live below less than $1 per day. Only about 4 million spend anything above 144,000 naira per month. Only about 3.74 million. What it tells me is that the tax base is extremely low. And if your tax base is low, there's no way that you're going to increase that net if you don't find a way for the rest to make money. So if they're not making money, there's no way you can tax them. That is the fundamental problem.
And revenue leakages like tax evasion as well. According to Sislak, we are losing about $18 billion annually. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, I won't call it evasion. I'll call it avoidance, because a lot of the big companies who ideally should be paying 2x taxes are currently paying half X tax, because they're looking for loopholes to avoid tax, and that's what's going on, and they'll continue to do it.
Okay, we just have to put our best foot forward and also ensure that we have the business climate become much more stable, because Nigerians cannot continue to bear this brunt far too long a time. We just need to see things get better. Thank you very much for your time on the Breakfast Show this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.